Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Spanish Football Podcast. I'm Phil Kitromilides. I'm joined by Sid Lowe, who is wearing his Real Oviedo shirt because earlier on today, he was at an Oviedo game. We're recording on Sunday night, by the way, just after the final game played today. And Sydney, we'll try not to dwell too much on what happened to Oviedo today because it wasn't great.
No, although I think in a way we probably have to, because it sort of is the story of the weekend. I mean, obviously Real Madrid is the story of the weekend.
Isn't. Yeah.
But Oviedo have sacked another manager. Well played, everybody. That's more managers, or as many managers as victories so far this season. Very good.
Yeah, shambles from Oviedo. We will talk a little bit about Real Oviedo this evening, inevitably. This is what's happened on Matchday 16 in La Liga EA Sports. Friday night saw Girona come from behind and beat Real Sociedad 2-1 at Anoeta. Girona's first away win of the season. Real Sociedad were absolutely appalling in the second half of this game, and they too have sacked their manager today. Sergio Francisco no longer in charge of the Basques. Atletico Madrid beating Valencia by 2-1 at the Metropolitano. Sydney was there for the first half of that game. He had to leave because he had to go and commentate or co-commentate Mallorca's 3-1 win over Elche. I was on commentary for Barcelona's 2-0 win against Osasuna. And Sydney, the absolute glorious madman, went to Getafe of his own volition to watch them lose 1-0 at home to Espanyol, high-flying Espanyol, who are doing absolutely brilliantly. Then Sydney, the glorious madman, on Sunday went down to Sevilla and saw Oviedo lose 4-0. The final act of Luis Carrion's second lamentable tenure in charge of the Asturians. Celta Vigo, a big win for them, beating Athletic Club 2-0 at Balaidos. The game between Levante and Villarreal today was postponed because of torrential downpours in the Valencia area. And it's just finished at the Estadio Mendizorroza. Real Madrid beating Alavés by 2-1. That is where we have to start the podcast, Sid, because despite
you're right.
It's not the story of the weekend, Oviedo. Real Oviedo. We will talk about them in a minute. We'll also talk about a lot of other things over at patreon.com/TSFP for the rest of the week. Come and be a patron. I tell you every week, but there's loads of content there, loads of analysis. We answer your questions as well. It starts from €4.75 a month. It's really not a huge amount of money. You get loads of bonus content. Sid, I think we do more bonus content than almost anyone else on Patreon. Almost anyone else, certainly.
Definitely. I mean, I don't know what anyone else does, but definitely.
Neither do I, but I've got the feeling that we're doing a lot. It's a bonus podcast every week. It is the TSFP Diary every week. It is the Q&A podcast every week as well. No ads over at patreon.com. Access to the WhatsApp group, the Discord as well. The newsletter every single week as well. So yeah, there's a lot going on. Patreon.com/TSFP. Speaking of a lot going on, let's talk about Real Madrid and their win at Alavés this evening, Sid, in the one of the preview pieces I read. I can't remember if it was in AS or Marca. They said that Real Madrid tonight had to vencer y convencer, win and convince. They did one of those things, but not necessarily the other.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summary of it. And it's one of those when you come to the end of this game and you think to yourself, has this changed anything? Now, obviously, the very, very ultra short-term answer is yes, because I think if they'd lost, particularly if they'd lost in a bad way, then I think we'd all be sitting here now thinking, well, you know, anytime in the next 10 minutes, anytime in the next hour, anytime in the next couple of hours, they're going to draw a line under this. I think the fact that they win probably takes maybe some of the urgency away. But I didn't think, and to use your line, convencer as well as vencer, I didn't think they convinced. And in that sense, I didn't think they did anything that really changes Xabi Alonso's position very significantly. I don't really know, and you may have a better feel for this than me, and because I think sometimes, particularly when you commentate on a game, your level of concentration is probably that bit clearer than mine. I don't really know fully how to analyze what Real Madrid did, or just as importantly, what Real Madrid were in this game. In my view, they were chaotic.
Yeah.
In my view, there was no real control. Well, there was actually for 20 minutes before they scored.
They had 80% possession in the first 15 minutes.
Exactly. In that period before they scored. But from then on, I felt there wasn't a very clear pattern. There wasn't a clear structure. there wasn't a clear sense of, if you like, a kind of a collective approach to what they're doing. Now, obviously, the context of this is, the number of players out is in double figures. All of the defence is out. So you're playing with Fede Valverde at right back. You're playing with Valdepeñas at left back, who, of course, will get better with age. Dudum, Tish, and so on. You're talking about, you're talking about a team where he's put on all of the creative players he can, more or less. So he's playing Rodrigo, Vinicius, and Mbappe, plus Bellingham. First time those three, I believe, have played together. Rodrigo, Vinicius, and Mbappe as starters. Yeah. And I didn't think it necessarily gave them very much. I mean, obviously, it gives them a lot in terms of there's a lot of talent on the pitch. But for example, even something as simple as try and tell me what the formation is. So my view is the formation is 4 at the back, but with the 2 fullbacks pushing quite high on occasions and giving width.
With Tchouaméni in between the 2 centre backs.
Yes, exactly. So it's 4 at the back with the 2 wing backs pushing quite high, but the central midfielder sometimes dropping between them. In those moments in which the central midfielder isn't dropping between them, it's a midfield central partnership, sort of Tchouaméni and Arda Güler. Theoretically, Bellingham playing on the left, but not playing very far to the left, but playing a bit nudge to the left. Yeah. Theoretically, on the right-hand side is, my mind's gone blank, Rodrigo, but he's not playing out wide. He's playing sort of tucked inside. It's almost a circle, Real Madrid's midfield. The middle of Madrid's midfield is almost a circle, or a square, if you like. And then up front, and this is one of the interesting things for me, Vinicius and Mbappe, but with their positions the other way around from what we've seen quite often. Now, not all game, because they were changing at times, but it was striking to me how often Vinicius was one through the middle, and Mbappe was one drifting wide to the left from where he scored. Now, that's a broad overview, but I don't think that structure held for very much of the game.
No.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe you saw it differently, but that was my feeling with this. I was kind of watching it thinking, what are they? What are they trying to be in this game?
Well, so this is not just in this game, though, Sid. I mean, this is the question that we
exactly
constantly. Real Madrid with their individual talent, and when you've got the best goalkeeper in the world, and when you've got the best centre forward in the world, and they're both in terrific form, you're going to be okay in quite a lot of games because they will get you out of it. But just structurally and in terms of like a plan and an idea, and I say that, but then I mean there is supposed to be an idea, and we sort of. We saw it at the start of the season. We thought we saw it. We thought we knew what this team was going to play like, and then that's just sort of it's just sort of fallen apart.
It feels like the idea has been lost. How do I put this? At the behest is probably not quite the right word. Has been lost because of the, if you like, the significance of the players. So in other words, this is an idea that a manager wants to put in place with some players that he has decided either don't really want to do it or don't naturally do it or don't fit with it and aren't that enamored with the idea. And so bit by bit, it gets not taken apart, but kind of gets broken down slightly. Now, we've talked about this a lot. It's not necessarily a bad thing for a manager to accommodate his players. In fact, I've said lots of times, I think one of the greatest skills really good managers have, which is really underrated, is to listen and take on board what those players are saying. But it feels like that disconnect and that hasn't properly been bridged at any real point. And bear in mind that one of the reasons that Xabi Alonso comes in is precisely because of this apparent desire to have a system, to have a manager with an identity and a clarity. And here's a plan. And we all allowed ourselves to be drawn into that mindset that said, wow, look how good these players are. Imagine if there was a structure and a system, which for what it's worth, by the way, I think was unfair on Ancelotti in the first place. But I also think it's unavoidable to look at last season and say anything other than that was a disastrous season for Real Madrid, an absolutely dreadful season all year long. And then I thought and I include myself in this, I'm as guilty as others, I thought during the Club World Cup and in the opening games of the season, we allowed ourselves to see the beginnings of the structure because I think there was one. And I think we imagined that would continue to progress. And actually it didn't. And it hasn't. And
so you're saying it's not progressed, because of the players.
I think it's not progressed because there's been a kind of a realization that it's not fitting them, that they're not following it through, that they're not taking it on in the way that Alonso would clearly have liked them to. And by the way, that is partly his fault as well. A manager's job, by the way, and it's worth making this point, is not to impose his system. It's to impose the right system.
That's quite deep, Sid. Yeah. Like it. All right. So it wasn't great from Real Madrid. They did get the win. Mbappe with his 17th league goal of the season. Rodrigo scoring his first league goal since the 19th of January. He's almost gone an entire calendar year without scoring in the league. Broke the longest ever goal drought in Real Madrid history midweek against Manchester City, and scored again tonight. I mean, I guess that's positive. I mean, it
Yes,
is
of course.
positive. It's not
Of course
negative,
it
but
is.
yeah,
Yeah, of
that's
course it is.
positive. Valdepeñas, decent little debut from him in difficult circumstances. But, Vinicius hasn't
I don't know
scored
if
in
you've had a
13
chance to see
games.
it. I don't know if you had a chance to see it yet, because obviously we're coming straight off the back of the game.
Yeah.
But in the press conference just now, Xabi Alonso made a point of saying that Valdepeñas played really well, and I was very pleased with him. And he said, in the only moment in which he got it wrong, they scored, which is that ball through for Carlos Vicente. Gorgeous touch and finish, by the way. Really, really well taken. And I don't want to say that Xabi Alonso is wrong, because he will have seen the movement, he will have seen what Valdepeñas did, and he will think that that was flawed.
Yeah,
but I feel like I have to take issue with him here.
He's not the one playing. Yeah,
exactly. It's Rudiger that plays him onside. It's not Valdepeñas that plays him onside. Now, it's true that it's Valdepeñas that steps out, and maybe if he doesn't step out, that doesn't happen. But Valdepeñas steps out, and by his position, succeeds in playing Carlos Vicente offside. It's Rudiger that's back out of position. It's true that at that point, Rudiger is partly distracted because he's having a go at his teammates for not putting the pressure on further up the pitch. And so in a way, that's quite a nice portrait of, if you like, the lack of coordination in Real Madrid. You've got one central defender stepping, one not stepping, and the one that's not stepping is pointing at the guys in front of him and saying, put that pressure on. And in taking the time to have a go, misses the pass, or at least misses his moment to step out and catch the player offside. And I just... there's a bit of me, and I don't know if I'm reading too much into this. So tell me if you think I am. Is that a manager who, for whatever reason, didn't want to publicly call out Rudiger, who has a status that Valdepeñas doesn't have?
Ooh, I think you're reading too much into it.
Okay, good. Thank you. Right. I prefer to think that. I prefer to believe that.
But
because I think that's right. But I couldn't help wondering that because of the way things have gone over the last few weeks.
You do have a more suspicious and twisted mind than me. I'm sort of naive, in my head. It's just
so innocent. Yeah,
rainbows and pink fluffy clouds. And
is that the same rainbows
malevolent thoughts
that Real Oviedo can't score in? Is that the same one?
Yes, something like that. All right, listen. There's loads we didn't talk about Real Madrid. Ask us a question. We'll deal with it on the Q&A pod on Tuesday. I want to move on and talk about Barcelona, who were 7 points clear of Real Madrid. Real Madrid cutting the gap to just 4 points. Barcelona taking a while to break down Osasuna. It was goalless at half time. Osasuna had done this at the Bernabeu as well on Matchday 1. They'd gone away and they did what they did at the Camp Nou, which was play a back five, and it was a flat back five. So it wasn't two wing backs. It was just five players across the back. Very difficult to break through. They did manage to break through, and at the end it was Rafinha who scored a brace. Let's talk about Rafinha, Sid, because he was playing as a number 10 in this game. It feels to me like it's a position he really likes, and he's quite happy to play there, but it doesn't feel like it's his best position.
Yeah, I think that probably sums it up reasonably well. In fact, post-game yesterday, I quite liked both his response and actually Hansi Flick's response on this. He said, look, I can play there and I enjoy it. And he said, but if you ask me what my favorite position is here, he says, I would say my natural position. He actually says my origin position, my original place. And he said, he makes a very interesting point. And I actually think this is really worth grabbing hold of. He says, when you come inside and you play in that central position, he said, you have so much less space and so much less time. He said, and you spend longer periods of the game not getting on the ball, which on the face of it is possibly counterintuitive in that you might say, well, you come inside, you're closer to where the play is. But obviously, if you go outside, you're more likely to be able to receive the ball and go at people. You're more likely to be able to pick it up. And that thing that we've talked about before, and I've explained this before, that idea of reference points, that when you play on the wing, your reference point is the whole pitch is to the side of you. And there's no one coming up behind you. There's no need to be looking there. There's no need to be worrying about what's coming, or at least not most of the time. In the middle of the pitch, you've got to be aware of that all the time, which is one of the reasons why the players that are successful there are so good, because they're the ones that can deal with that in a way that others can't. And so Rafinha's saying, I can do this and I like it and I like being close to goal, but it's harder and my other position is better, raises that question about if you are going to try and find the number 10 from amongst your forwards rather than from amongst your midfielders. In other words, instead of it being Fermin or Dani Olmo, you're going to choose it from one of your forwards. Does that lean us back to going to the Lamine Yamal experiment rather than the Rafinha experiment? Even though Hansi Flick, I think, probably prefers Rafinha there than Lamine Yamal, or at least prefers the overall balance of the team more when it's Rafinha than Lamine Yamal. And this is where I come on to what Hansi Flick said, because I liked his comment about this. He was asked about this and he said, but it's not about what Rafinha likes. it's about what's good for the team. And of course, that's the way it should be.
So is it like, yeah, okay. I'm interested here to see
Yeah.
what the future is in terms of the Barcelona forward line, because I hadn't considered that this would be something sort of a potential set thing going forward. But we've seen Hansi Flick and his desire and ability to get players to play in different positions.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, Gerard Martin is now sort of starting centre back for Barcelona at the moment, when, you know, he was substitute left back last season. Eric Garcia can literally play. I mean, genuinely played everywhere. He's played right back, centre backs, left back, centre mid. You've got Rafinha now playing in number 10.
The other thing about Eric Garcia is he played ahead of Frenkie de Jong this time. So this wasn't him playing in midfield because there was emergency because people were missing. This was him playing in that midfield position even when Frenkie de Jong was available. And I think that's really interesting. And obviously we should point out at this stage that Eric in midfield was something that Xavi Hernandez had done as well, but without a huge amount of conviction, I think. You know, he's sort of seen it as a solution. And I think Hansi Flick had initially seen it as a solution, but I think it's a solution he's increasingly becoming quite convinced by.
You think so? I mean,
yeah,
in a big game,
I think he likes it.
Yeah.
I think he likes it.
I mean, he definitely does like it.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's
the right thing and also it's worth remembering that, you know, we're talking about that adaptation of one of the forward players to play behind the forward line. Yeah, it's worth saying that is happening while Dani Olmo's out and while Fermin's out and while you're looking for an alternative, because you don't necessarily have the other player. You know, Gavi's not available at the moment either.
Fermin is not out. Fermin is
no, you're right. Sorry, Fermin's not out. Yeah. You're right. Fermin's not out.
Very much available. Started in midweek in the Champions League.
Yes, yes, he did. Yeah.
Okay. Barcelona kept a clean sheet, Sid. Previous 4 matches, they'd come from behind to win. They did not concede, but if they were ever going to keep a clean sheet, it was against an Osasuna side who had lost their last 5 games at the Camp Nou or away to Barcelona without scoring. And they were also the worst away team in the division, and they've only scored 3 goals away from home all season. So there wasn't too much threat from them. And yet, we saw Victor Munoz bursting through that high line, and they knew exactly what they wanted to do. It was literally just pump the ball up and Victor Munoz will chase it, or give the ball to him and he will just try and burst through the lines. And when he went off with about 65 minutes to go, all sense of threat from Osasuna just left. I just thought, what are you doing, Lishi? Why are you taking him off? Keep him on.
Yeah, I'm assuming it was just because he was exhausted. But that's it.
You should be exhausted.
Exactly. It did feel like it had gone at that point. I mean, for what it's worth, there's a little bit of me, and apologies for saying this, there's a little bit of me that feels like there isn't very much to say about this game now that we've dealt with the number 10 position and so on, because this was essentially one team parks the bus, the other team tries really, really hard to find a way through and eventually succeeds. Now, admittedly, succeeds the first time when actually for about the first time, a handful of Osasuna's players were further up the pitch. In fact, Lissi explained it in these terms. He said, this is what we had to do. And in fact, at the one point in which we were exposed, they scored. In other words, we should never have allowed ourselves to be exposed. Now, who knows what would have happened in the how many minutes were left, another remaining 26, 27 minutes or however many it was at that point. But I mean, he sort of got a point, but my God, it wasn't a lot of fun to watch. I say this as someone who saw Osasuna do this to Oviedo, for goodness sake. So, it's not just Barcelona.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't been like a particularly brilliant weekend in terms of entertainment.
No,
obviously that game wasn't brilliant. Alavés Real Madrid wasn't brilliant. Getafe Espanyol, lol. Tell me about Atletico Madrid Valencia. I mean, you only saw the first half of this game.
Yeah, I thought it was. Do you know what? At the risk of falling into the trap that the Spanish media do a lot, I thought this was a classic 2 o'clock kickoff. And it was one of those games, where it feels like the pitch is a bit dry, no one's really up
Yeah,
for it, then the atmosphere is not all that good. It's just kind of a bit plodding. I actually
yeah,
thought the first half was really poor, like really,
yeah.
really poor. Very nicely taken goal from Koke. They'd had Hugo Duro hit the crossbar on, I think it was 18 seconds into the game, and I didn't like Atletico Madrid at all. But they did eventually
You said they
find
were
a way
slow.
through. Really slow. I thought it was really
Yeah,
slow. I thought everything about it was slow. The movement of the circulation, the ball, the players themselves. I kind of felt like this was a team that sort of knew they were playing someone not very good, having just come off the international break. Sorry, the Champions League midweek, where they picked up a really big win, and it was kind of like, are we doing this? It felt a bit like that.
the match was won by a superb goal from
Yeah.
Antoine Griezmann. What a great
Yeah.
goal!
Very nice, taking a little touch of the Carlos Vicente in it, wasn't there? In terms of the first control as the ball's coming over to him, reaching out to bring it down, really, really well. It would be very opportunistic and very unfair of me to say now, given that Koke and Griezmann scored the goals, to repeat something I've said before. But sod it, I'm going to do it. They're still the best two players, aren't they?
No, they're not. No,
No, okay, all right, fair enough.
no.
Yeah, all right.
They're-
Bayern and Fullian probably are, but yeah.
yeah, yeah. But still, it's a win for Atleti, and they are. I was going to say still in it. They are still in it because it's only match day
Sort of.
16.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, they are. They're there. I mean, it's 9
yeah.
points, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. But yeah, how bad are things looking for Valencia?
Well, you know what? I think if we judge by this game, not quite as bad as we thought maybe a week ago, because I
Yeah,
thought there were bits of this game that they did well. I thought the big thing for me actually was they created a bit more than I thought they were going to
yeah,
in a very slow and not particularly exciting game. And there were, we were talking about this, was it last week or the week before, about like how many good players have Valencia really got? And we
yes,
kind of came to this conclusion where Valencia are a team where you think they've got a handful of good
yes.
players, but you're not actually sure they really have. And this was one of
Did
those
that
games where,
change when you saw them in the flesh?
no, not really, but there
No.
was a couple of players that you thought, yeah, okay, that I still think Pepelu's a good player.
Yeah.
There's bits of things that they do. Beltran, of course, scores a really, really nice goal. There's something there, but I'm not sure that there's very much.
Okay. I don't want to alarm anyone, but Espanyol are fifth, Sid.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is incomprehensible. I mean,
It really is.
nobody saw this coming.
Four
Espanyol are
wins in a
fifth.
row. Yeah, four
Yeah.
wins in a row. And I really like the way that Manolo Gonzalez dealt with it. He said, that's a big deal. That's really difficult for the big clubs. So imagine for a club like us. He was asked if this kind of result, helps him feel a bit better about them being knocked out in the Copa del Rey. And he went off on one. He said, no, I'm still pissed off about that. I'm so I'm so angry about that still. That was out of order. And he said it was out of order because we didn't really compete. He said a second division B team can beat you. He said, I've been a manager of a second division B team that beat a first division team. In fact, it was Getafe, funnily enough. But he said, but you can't get beaten the way we were beaten. And I think that's it's a bit simplistic, this. I appreciate that it's a bit simplistic, but that is sort of the key to what Espanyol have done. I think what there is with Espanyol is a kind of, and this fits very much with Manolo Gonzalez's career path and also his personality. There's something very amateur about them, a kind of an amateur spirit about them. The determination to compete all the time, to give absolutely everything, to put yourself on the line all the time, to alter your game if you have.
Borderline patronizing. I
It
know you're
does,
not meaning to be, but yeah.
Exactly. But it's that there's an amateur spirit in that sense, in that this is kind of, it's sort of not sullied by the fact that professionals, that they've created this sort of spirit that sort of says, and that's a silly thing to say as well, because professionals, Christ alive, do they give a lot to their profession? But that this kind of, that says there's something really, really tight about the squad, really clear about how we've got to compete every single game. And this was defined really quite well by this game, in that what Manolo said post-game, and he's quite right, I think, is we don't always play like this, but we knew that against Getafe, we had to play like this. This is what we had to do. If we have to go and do their game, we'll go and do their game. We'll play that way. He said that he played two forwards in part because he knew they were almost certainly going to have to go long. And they're going to have to bypass midfield. And so if we're going to have to bypass midfield, there's no point in bypassing midfield for it just to come back again. So I have two big people up there who can bring it down and try and allow us to play from there. And I was really taken in the flesh by Roberto, the centre forward, who basically gets kicked shitless all game and never complains. Gives a little bit back, but not very much. But he gets on with it. He chases people down. He's hassling all the time. In the game in which he did the least in terms of tangible, measurable things that he did, because he did almost nothing, he did so much.
Yeah.
So
Bob
much.
Fernandez.
Yeah. And I think that's part of them. And I think that's a big part of Espanyol's success. It's also true, and Manolo was quite right when he said post-game, he said, the minute that we forget who we are, we'll go under again. He said, if we start thinking, whoa, we're fifth, we're great, we're going to go under. And I think he's right.
See, there you are doing sort of analysis of Spanish football, and I'm here trying to think of a sort of alter ego character for Bob Fernandez. I've come up with potentially a Republican senator for Utah, and he is someone who is. I'm going to work on it, but yeah, we've got the start of the character.
We'll get there. We'll get there. Yeah, we'll get there.
Okay, hardworking Bob Fernandez working for you. Tell us about Sid. Yes. Tell us about what happened with, I mean, briefly, because we're coming to the end of the podcast, what happened with Oviedo. How bad was it today, the 4-0 win against a Sevilla side who, you shouldn't be losing 4-0 to. And just what a shambles it is that Carrion came back, didn't win a game, got you rooted to the bottom of the table, and it's gone again.
Well, we're not actually bottom. I should point that out, but yes, I
spiritually, emotionally. It's true. Levante are below you. It's true. They have got a game fewer.
Remember, I told you a couple of days ago that Real Oviedo were the best team in the league defensively over the last 5 games. Well, that's just gone out the window with 4 goals conceded today.
Yeah.
You've asked me how bad it was. I think
you've seen some absolute dog shit.
I think this is the worst Real Oviedo game I've ever seen. Now, obviously, I've got to say, allowing for the division we're in, because of course, when Oviedo were playing in Segunda B and in Tercera, there were players of less quality. There were games that probably had less quality. But I think this is worse. It was dog shit. It was completely awful. It was really, really, really bad. Right. And it was so weak. The way that Sevilla scored the first couple of goals, it was so poor all the way through. There was almost no one in the team that I could say had an even half decent game, except maybe Elias Chaida. And he was the first taken off, and I didn't understand it, and I don't think anyone did. And let's just go to what you were saying. Let's look at this I'm going to do this really quickly, I promise you. Real Oviedo come back after 24 years. They sack the manager who brought them back, who all the fans absolutely love. That manager in 7 games has won twice against Real Sociedad and away at Mestalla. And you might think that's not very much, but they played Real Madrid, they played Barcelona, they've been to Villarreal, they've been to Getafe. You couldn't really expect very much better results than they had. In fact, I think 6 points at that point was more than I anticipated them having. I thought they might have had 4 or 5, I thought they would have. And that was me being optimistic. They sack him. And when they sack him, they bring in Luis Carrion. Now, Luis Carrion was the manager that took Oviedo into playoffs 2 years before. And at that point was very popular because Oviedo played really good football. And they've been really unlucky not to go up. They didn't go up and Espanyol went up in their place. But he then went to Las Palmas. The fans, in that sense, feel completely let down by him. So when he comes back, you're getting rid of a manager that everybody loves to bring in a manager that everybody hates. Now, is this a right decision in terms of the technical quality of the managers? At that point, you could possibly say it is, but you've created an environment where everyone is furious. Oviedo fans aren't stupid. They knew there was a good chance of going down this year. They knew that they were going to be struggling all the way to the end, but they would have enjoyed being in the first division and if you like, kind of being with the team all the way. Instead, you kind of chucked mud on top of that. Then you get the situation where Carrion comes in and says, and he makes a mistake, and it's not deliberate, but he says, oh, this was the right decision. In other words, putting down the guy who's just brought Oviedo up. That pisses people off. The owner of the club then says, well, why are you talking to me about the fact that we're not in the relegation zone, so we shouldn't have sacked the manager? We should be competing for European place. At which point, of course, everyone thinks, have you seen our team? We should not be competing for a European place. And now we are in the relegation zone. And now a second manager has been sacked who's never won a first division game now. because his spell at Las Palmas finished with no wins. His spell at Oviedo's finished with no wins. Now, I don't necessarily dismiss him as a manager. I personally think, at least grabbing onto his first spell at Oviedo, was very good. But you get rid of another manager, and he's gone, and now there is this sense of total kind of fury and anger after 24 years waiting for this, and it's in flames already. And that's almost the worst part, worse than just the fact that you're in the relegation zone. And here we go. In the games that Carrion took charge of, Oviedo only scored in one of them. And actually, funny enough, they've played possibly more expansive football than they did with Paunovic, but not scored. And it looks like the man they're after is the current manager of Valladolid, who are 10th in the second division.
Who's that?
Now, Almada, his name is. Now, forgive me for saying so, and I really, really, really hope he's a brilliant manager. But I don't know about you, but when the headline point is the guy that's currently 10th in the second division, I don't know. I'm not. I don't know. I'm not bowled over by it. Put it that way.
Why aren't you getting Luis Garcia Plaza?
Which is the man that everyone assumed we were going to get. Yeah, I don't know.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Out of interest, Oviedo have got 10 points. And the lowest ever points tally is Sporting Gijón.
Yeah.
With 13. So yes. You're not going to be the worst team in history.
We're not, but I tell you what, right now, some Oviedo fans are thinking, I really hope we're not going to be the worst team in history.
Yeah, I think you can get 3 or 4 points between now and the end of the season. You're only 5 points from safety. You're not completely.
Well, that's the other thing, is this weekend is the first time that it's been more than a game's worth of points. Yeah, and I think that obviously is a problem. Yeah.
Not good. All right, listen, we will leave it there. Monday Night Football is tomorrow. Rayo against Betis. I'll be trying to go to that. You won't be, because you are heading off on a very long trip to do a very interesting and potentially exciting interview.
I do hope so. Yeah.
Will be revealed in the forthcoming days and weeks. Thanks very much for listening, guys. We'll be over at Patreon for the rest of the week, so make sure you're signed up to that. And if you're not, then okay, bad move on your part, but whatever. We'll be back on Friday for the preview pod, looking ahead to Matchday 17. So make sure you join us then, amigos. Adios.
Cheerio.